I, 28M, recently got married to my amazing wife Sarah, 27F, and I still can't believe what went down at our wedding 3 months ago. There's a lot to unpack here, so let me start from the beginning. My mom married Frank's dad when I was 15 and Frank was 18. From day one, Frank made it clear he didn't want me in his family. At first, it was small things. He'd exclude me from activities, make comments about how I wasn't really his brother, or tell his friends I was just some kid his dad was stuck taking care of. I tried to connect with him because I'd always wanted a sibling, but he shut down every attempt. Our parents tried family therapy for a while, but Frank would just sit there silently or give one-word answers. He'd act perfect when adults were around, but as soon as they left, he'd go back to making my life difficult. He spread rumors about me at school, told family members I was causing problems at home, and even tried to convince our parents I was stealing money from them. I wasn't. Despite all this, I kept trying to maintain peace for our parents' sake. My mom was finally happy after years of struggling as a single parent, and my stepdad genuinely tried to be a good father to me. I didn't want to ruin their happiness by fighting with Frank constantly. Things got worse when I started college. Frank was living at home and working part-time, clearly unhappy that our parents were helping pay for my education. That's when I met Delilah, 27F, in my sophomore year. She was everything I thought I wanted, smart, beautiful, and seemed to genuinely care about me. It was my first serious relationship, and I fell hard. Frank suddenly started showing interest in being my brother when Delilah came around. He'd make excuses to hang out when she visited, text her about homework, they were both taking business classes, and act like we'd always been close. I was so happy thinking he was finally accepting me that I completely missed the red flags. Delilah turned out to be incredibly toxic. She'd play mind games, constantly compare me to other guys, and make me feel like I was lucky she even looked at me. If I brought up any concerns, she'd turn it around and make me feel crazy for questioning her. She isolated me from my friends, saying they were jealous of our relationship. I lost myself trying to be good enough for her. After 2 years together, I discovered she'd been cheating on me with multiple guys. When I confronted her, she somehow twisted everything around. She told all our mutual friends that I was controlling and paranoid, that I'd pushed her into other men's arms with my jealousy. Most of our friends believed her because she'd spent months painting herself as the victim of my insecurities. The breakup destroyed me. I spent the next year barely functioning, questioning everything about myself. I cut contact with most people from college and focused on finishing my degree. It took me nearly 2 years to feel ready to date again. Then I met Sarah through work 3 years ago. She was different from anyone I'd ever known, genuine, straightforward, and incredibly kind. She helped me see what a healthy relationship should look like. When we got engaged last year, I felt like I'd finally found my place in the world. Frank, predictably, couldn't stand seeing me happy. He'd make comments about how Sarah was too good for me, or ask her if she was sure about marrying into our complicated family. Sarah always shut him down politely, which only seemed to make him angrier. Despite his behavior, my mom begged me to invite Frank to the wedding. She said he'd been going through a rough time since his breakup with Hannah, 29F, 2 years ago. Hannah was actually the only girlfriend of Frank's that I liked. She was sweet and became close with our family during their 5 years together. When they broke up, she stayed in touch with our parents but never explained exactly why she left Frank. I agreed to invite both Frank and Hannah to keep the peace. Hannah had always been kind to me, and I honestly thought having her there might help keep Frank in check. Looking back, I feel stupid for not seeing what was coming. The day of our wedding started perfectly. Sarah looked incredible, our friends and family were all celebrating with us, and even the weather cooperated. Then Frank walked in with Delilah on his arm, both of them smirking like they'd just won something. Seeing her brought back every horrible memory from college. Sarah noticed immediately that something was wrong, and when I told her who Delilah was, she was ready to have them thrown out. I wanted to avoid drama, so I asked her to let it go. That was probably my first mistake. We didn't expect Hannah's reaction though. When she saw Frank with Delilah, something just snapped. She walked straight up to them during the reception and started exposing Frank's true nature to everyone within earshot. She revealed how he'd emotionally abused her throughout their relationship, isolating her from friends, gaslighting her into thinking she was crazy, and trying to control her money. Hannah told everyone that Frank enjoyed breaking women down, making them dependent on him before discarding them. She warned Delilah that she'd be next, as Frank had a pattern of targeting vulnerable women. Then came the bombshell. Hannah revealed that Frank had been planning this revenge for months, secretly meeting with Delilah just to get back at me for stealing his family. The room went completely silent. Other guests started whispering and staring at Frank, who looked like he might explode. When he tried defending himself, Hannah just laughed and asked if he was going to accuse her of being crazy again, like he did every time she tried to stand up to him. Sarah and I had security escort all three of them out. The rest of the wedding was awkward, but our friends and family rallied around us and helped salvage the evening. Since then, Frank has been constantly calling and texting, demanding I help fix his reputation. He says Hannah was lying and that I owe him because I humiliated him in front of everyone. Our family is split. My mom thinks I should hear Frank out, saying family should always come first. My stepdad is furious with Frank for trying to ruin our wedding. Some relatives are saying I'm being too harsh and should help him since he's family. But after everything he's done, I don't feel like I owe him anything. Ida for refusing to help him? Update 1. Hey everyone. It's been about 3 weeks since my original post. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Unfortunately, things have gotten much worse, so I needed to update you all on what's happening. Frank has completely lost control since the wedding. After I refused to help clear his name, he started showing up at my workplace almost daily. The first time, he cornered me in the parking garage before my shift. He followed me to my car, screaming about how I'd ruined his life and how everyone now thinks he's an abuser. I had to lock myself in my car while he banged on the windows. Security finally came and removed him, but not before several of my coworkers witnessed everything. 2 days later, he showed up again, this time during lunch. He walked straight into our office building and started causing a scene in the lobby. He was yelling about how I'd orchestrated everything with Hannah to destroy him, and how I'd been jealous of him our whole lives. Security had to physically remove him while he kept screaming about what a terrible brother I was. My boss called me into his office afterward and suggested I file a police report. HR got involved after his 3rd visit in a week. They documented everything and told me they'd support any legal action I decided to take. They also had to send a company-wide email about updated security protocols because of him. It was humiliating having everyone at work know about my personal drama. But Frank wasn't satisfied with just harassing me. Somehow, he got hold of Sarah's personal email and work contact information. We still don't know how he got it, but we suspect he might have stolen our parents' phones during a visit and copied her details. He started sending her long, rambling emails about my past with Delilah. He dug up old photos from college, pictures of me and Delilah at parties, on dates, even screenshots of old social media posts where I'd talked about loving her. He sent these to Sarah with messages about how I was still in love with Delilah and how Sarah was just a replacement. He twisted our entire history, telling Sarah that I was the one who cheated on Delilah and emotionally abused her until she had no choice but to seek comfort with other people. Sarah showed me all his messages, and we both felt sick reading them. The way he manipulated every detail of my past to make me look like a monster was disturbing. Sarah knows the truth and has blocked him everywhere, but it's affecting her at work. He keeps calling her office using different numbers, to the point where her assistant now has to screen all incoming calls. Yesterday, things got even worse. My mom called me crying because Frank had convinced her that Sarah and I were planning to cut all contact with the family. He told her we blamed them for the wedding disaster and were secretly planning to move away without telling anyone. He even showed her fake text messages he'd created to prove it. My mom was heartbroken until I explained that none of it was true. Hannah reached out to me privately after seeing Frank's social media posts about the situation. She shared some disturbing details about their relationship that she hadn't mentioned at the wedding. During their 5 years together, Frank installed tracking apps on her phone without her knowledge. He would show up unexpectedly wherever she went, then accuse her of cheating if she was talking to any male friends or coworkers. Hannah told me that when she finally left him, he stalked her for months. He'd park outside her apartment at night, show up at her workplace, and create fake social media accounts to monitor her activities. She had to threaten legal action before he backed off. She said she never told our family the full extent of his behavior because she didn't want to hurt my parents. The biggest shock came from Delilah herself. She sent me a long message apologizing for coming to the wedding. According to her, Frank had been manipulating her for months. He found her on social media and started feeding her lies about how miserable I was with Sarah. He convinced her that I still had feelings for her and was making a huge mistake getting married. He told her that Sarah was just a rebound and that I talked about Delilah constantly. When Delilah realized Frank had used her as part of his revenge plot, she felt terrible. She showed me their text conversations where Frank repeatedly pressured her to come to the wedding, saying it would be her last chance to prevent me from making the biggest mistake of my life. She's cut all contact with him and wants nothing to do with his games anymore. Frank has been spreading his lies through every possible channel. He created multiple fake social media accounts to post in our family groups about how I'm a pathological liar who manipulated Hannah into making false accusations. Some distant relatives who weren't at the wedding are actually believing him because they don't know the whole story. He's painting himself as the victim of a cruel conspiracy between me and Hannah. The final straw came when my stepdad confronted Frank about his behavior. Frank completely lost it and started screaming about how my stepdad never loved him and only cared about his new son. He accused him of favoring me from the beginning and said he'd spent years trying to replace Frank with me. My stepdad was devastated. He's always tried to treat us both equally and bent over backward to make Frank feel secure when he married my mom. Right now, Frank is staying with his friend and supposedly having a mental health crisis. Several family members are pressuring me to reach out and make peace before things escalate further. They think that since I'm the stable one, I should be the bigger person and help him through this difficult time. But I'm done managing Frank's emotions and problems. He's a 31-year-old man who deliberately tried to ruin one of the most important days of my life. Now he's actively trying to destroy my marriage and family relationships because he didn't get the reaction he wanted. I'm not going to pretend everything is fine just to keep the peace anymore. Sarah and I are documenting everything and looking into legal options to stop his harassment. We're also planning to move to a new place where he won't know our address. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, we're focused on protecting ourselves and our marriage from his toxic behavior. Update 2. Hey everyone. It's been 2 months since my last update, and I honestly wish I had better news to share. Sarah and I thought moving to a new place would give us some peace, but Frank found ways to make our lives even more difficult. Last week, Frank somehow tracked down our new address. We were so careful about keeping it private, but we suspect one of our relatives who felt sorry for him gave it to him. At first, we noticed a car parked across the street for several hours, but didn't think much of it. Then around 11 p.m., there was loud banging on our front door. Frank was completely drunk, screaming about how I destroyed his life. He kept yelling about how I turned everyone against him and how I'd pay for what I did. Our neighbors called the police, but Frank sped off in his car before they arrived. The officers took a report, but said they couldn't do much since he was already gone. The next morning, we found out what triggered his meltdown. Hannah had finally decided to share her full story about Frank's abusive behavior in a local Facebook group. Her post detailed their entire relationship, the manipulation, the control, the gaslighting. It went viral in our community within hours. What we didn't expect was for other women to come forward. 2 of Frank's ex-girlfriends from before Hannah shared similar stories. One of them, his high school girlfriend, revealed she had to move to a different state because of his stalking and threats. Another woman he dated briefly in college described how he'd threatened to release private photos of her if she told anyone about his behavior. Frank's workplace found out about everything after the post spread through the community. Someone sent screenshots to his HR department. They conducted an internal investigation and discovered he'd been using company resources to track down personal information about me, Sarah, and Hannah. They fired him immediately. Now Frank is telling everyone that I orchestrated this whole thing with Hannah to ruin his career. He's convinced I paid these women to lie about him and destroy his reputation. He even showed up at our parents' house with a crazy theory about how I'd been planning this for years because I was jealous of his success. The situation got even more intense when Delilah decided to come forward with her own story. She posted screenshots of her conversations with Frank from before the wedding. The messages showed how he'd manipulated and essentially blackmailed her into being his date. He would compare her to Hannah, making subtle threats about ruining her reputation if she didn't help him get revenge on me. In one message, Frank told Delilah that he knew secrets about her current relationship and wouldn't hesitate to tell her boyfriend everything if she backed out of their plan. He'd been gathering information about her for months, waiting for the perfect moment to use it against her. Reading those messages made me feel sick. This was a whole new level of calculating behavior. Things reached a breaking point when Frank showed up at our parents' house demanding money. He'd lost his job and couldn't pay rent, so he expected them to bail him out. When my mom refused, saying he needed to take responsibility for his actions, he completely lost it. He started throwing things, breaking family photos, and screaming about how they chose their fake son over their real one. My stepdad had to physically remove him from the house while my mom called the police. They both filed reports and got security cameras installed. It was the first time they'd seen his violent side personally, and it shattered any remaining doubts they had about Hannah's story. We finally got a restraining order against Frank last week. The judge took one look at our evidence, the threatening messages, workplace security footage, witness statements from our neighbors, police reports, and documentation of his social media harassment, and granted it immediately. He's now legally required to stay away from us, our home, and our workplaces. Some of our more distant relatives are still defending Frank, saying he's just going through a difficult time and needs family support. They keep insisting that blood is thicker than water and that family should stick together no matter what. But most people have finally seen Frank for who he really is. Sarah and I had to completely change our lives because of him. We installed security cameras all around our house, changed our daily routines, and even switched grocery stores to avoid running into him. It's exhausting living like this, constantly looking over our shoulders, but we won't let his toxic behavior control us anymore. Final update. Hey everyone. After getting so many messages asking for updates, I felt I should share how everything turned out. A lot has happened in the past 6 months, and I think it's finally time to close this chapter of my life. Frank finally faced real consequences for his actions when he violated the restraining order twice in 1 week. The first time, he waited outside Sarah's workplace, claiming he just wanted to talk things out. The second time, he tried to follow us home from a restaurant. The police arrested him, and he spent a week in jail. We thought jail time might be a wake-up call, but it just made him more bitter. After getting out, he moved to Arizona to live with some distant relatives. Even from another state, he's still trying to cause problems. He created an entire website called The Truth About My Toxic Family where he posts his twisted version of events. The site is full of edited screenshots, out-of-context photos, and complete lies about me, Sarah, and our parents. Last month, he took things further by trying to contact Sarah's boss through LinkedIn. He sent long messages claiming Sarah was unstable and dangerous to have in the workplace. Her company's legal team got involved and threatened him with harassment charges if he didn't stop. They've been incredibly supportive through all this. My mom is really struggling to cope with everything. She recently started seeing a therapist to deal with her guilt. She told me that Frank showed signs of manipulative behavior even as a child, but she always made excuses for him because she felt guilty about his dad leaving when he was young. Now she's in contact with Frank's biological father for the first time in 20 years, trying to understand if there were warning signs they missed. Hannah has turned her experience into something positive. She started a support group for people who've dealt with similar situations, and it's already helped dozens of people recognize and leave toxic relationships. She and Sarah have become close friends, which is one good thing that came from this mess. Delilah moved to Seattle for a fresh start, and honestly, I hope she finds peace and healing there. The hardest part has been watching how this affected my stepdad. He's aged visibly in the past 6 months, and I often catch him looking at old family photos with tears in his eyes. He keeps asking what he could have done differently, how he could have been a better father to Frank. It breaks my heart because he was always the one trying hardest to keep our family together. Some family members still pass us messages about Frank. Apparently, he's telling everyone he's found God and is working on himself, but his website and harassment tell a different story. We've made it clear to all relatives that we don't want updates about him or his life. Some think we're being too harsh, but we need this boundary for our own peace. Sarah and I have fully embraced our decision to go no contact with Frank. We've blocked him on everything and made it clear to family that any information shared with them won't be kept secret from him will result in them being cut off too. It might seem extreme, but we've learned the hard way that giving people chances to hurt you only leads to more pain. The biggest news is that Sarah and I are expecting our first child. Finding out about the pregnancy really cemented our decision to keep toxic people out of our lives. We want our child to grow up in a peaceful home, surrounded by people who genuinely love and support each other. Looking back at everything since the wedding, it's clear that Frank's attempt at revenge backfired completely. In trying to hurt me, he exposed his true nature to everyone who was still making excuses for him. He lost his family, his job, and his reputation, all because he couldn't handle seeing me happy. This will be my last update about this situation. We're focusing on building our family and creating a positive future without toxic people in our lives. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is accept that some family relationships can't be fixed, and that's okay. Thank you to everyone who supported us through this nightmare. Your words of encouragement helped more than you know.